Okay, let's get this thing started. This is going to be a mega show today. This is going to be our first one. We have about a dozen conversations stacked up today. It's going to be a fun day. We're here again in Mexico City. We're kicking off the day with Nano from Bitso and Iñigo from Incode.
Stable Dash Live is sponsored by Agora, built for global institutions moving money at the speed of the internet. You can learn more at agora.finance.
There's some partnership announcements. There's some fun things that you guys are going to do together. Maybe we start with, we'll kick off with Nano. If you want to intro yourself in your role at the company, we'll do the same for you next. And then I'd love to just kick off with the partnership that you guys are talking about today.
Sure. Thank you, Rodrigo. So quick intro on my side. I am Nano Rodriguez. I lead payments and operations here at Bitso. Super excited to be here. Thanks for the invitation to the podcast, but also happy to have you here.
Yeah,
in this
fun
conference. Very fun days. So this is the second day, so a lot of activity happening.
Nano, you've been at Bitso for how long now?
I have been for 5 years and a half.
5 years.
It's been a while now.
Yeah.
But
You've seen a lot. You've seen a lot at the company through that time.
Indeed. Yeah, it has been a long ride, similar to a roller coaster maybe, but yeah, fun ride.
And what is your current focus? I'm sure that has evolved a lot in 5 years. What are you currently focused on?
As a company, do you mean? Or
for you personally at the business?
So right now I'm leading the payments team, which it's a component. It has different components. Under my reports, I lead the operations team, and the alliances team that manage the key relationships as Incode that has become one of the relevant partner for us. We manage relationship with our key payments providers, intermediaries that we use across the region. So that's the payment function right now, and that's my current focus.
Awesome, cool. Pass it to you. Well, I'll try my best to mediate throughout the chat. It's a little easier being one-on-one, but I'll do my best.
That's great. I'm super happy to be here. Iñigo Castillo, I lead Incode at LATAM. So here from Mexico City, we run operations all the way down to Buenos Aires. Incode is an identity company. So what we do is we help customers in a variety of sectors and industries to adequately identify their customers and prospects in an ever more fraudulent environment, right?
Yeah.
I mean, fraud is getting more complex and more sophisticated to catch. So, I mean, we help our customers to, in a very simple way, to identify the good guys and the bad guys when they're acquiring customers.
I was talking last night with I was at a ramp event, and I'm forgetting the name of this company, but it was someone building in compliance who was based in Mexico City, and I asked the question what the difference is between compliance and fraud. It seems like there's sort of sharing a Venn diagram, but how would you describe? I think he described it as, well, I'll let you describe. How do you see the differences?
Yeah,
there?
I mean, it's an interesting question, and we see it because when we're an enterprise service company, right? And we do our stakeholder mapping, and it's such a different conversation when you talk to a head of fraud or a company and when you talk to a compliance officer. So compliance officers usually just go through it's like a checkbox, right? And they're doing that checkbox, and they want to be sure when a regulator comes in or whatever that they're ready. And then fraud has, I think, at least in my opinion, a deeper or a more business-oriented, that sounds interesting, but a business-oriented outlook where they it's not just checking the boxes, right? I mean, if you ask a fraud manager or whatever, they get paid for how much fraud they let pass or not, right? It's not just it has a direct impact, or the KPIs had a more direct impact on a company's balance sheet at the end. So I would say that's kind of the difference. I think again, compliance officers are more regulated, focused, stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to dive into more of each of the focus of each of you separately, but what are you announcing today? What is this partnership? And give us the details of how you guys come together.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe sharing a little bit of a background here for a better understanding of this decision and how these partnerships comes in place. But Bitso has been historically characterized itself by being a company that we put trust and security on top of any other priority. That's non-negotiable for us. We have been operating this region for 12 years, and our main value for no matter in what team do you work is to honor the commitment with trust and security that we have with our users and customers' funds. So I think that in honoring that commitment, we are obviously continuously evolving that way that we build solutions and the companies that we partner up with to help us in this mission of becoming the most secure and trusted platform across the region. So as a result, this was maybe this is a long story, but Bitso has a set of different providers to validate the identity of the users that are being onboarded into our company. Okay. We have like more than 9 million users on the retail side and 2,000 businesses on the Bitso business side, on the B2B arm of our company.
You said 9 million or 90 million?
9 million.
9 million consumer users.
Yeah.
And then 2,000
businesses.
Okay.
Yeah. So we found out that there were like an opportunity to improve the way that we were validating identities of individuals in the region. And in the team that I lead, it was historically a payments team, a payments related. So this was a hard mission because we decided to run an RFP and to took all the relationships with our current providers that runs KYC or ID verification in Bitso to really make a bold move and improve the way that we were validating this. So in alignment with dozens of teams in Bitso, with compliance, legal, product, operation, engineering, etc., we built one of the strongest, maybe longest RFPs that was ever built to evaluate all vendors across the industry.
I can attest to that.
So he put you through a lot, is what you're saying. He made you work for this one.
She can confirm that. So we built this very long process, very tough process with dozens of tests, real tests, dozens of questionnaires, etc. And we evaluated more than 30 different vendors across the region.
Wow. That's a lot. I'm surprised there's like 30 people in this stack that can deliver that. And this is just to be clear for people who are kind of like, getting to know this a little bit. So this is the process that you go to if I'm wanting to get an account with Bitso to do, whether I'm trading or sending funds or bringing funds into the platform. This is the part of the process which is typically like the worst part of the process because it's typically like full of a ton of steps and time, and it can be a really it can be a process that loses customers if you do it wrong. And there's a ton of like user experience things. So this is like for all the companies that we talked with, this part of the stack has typically been riddled with friction historically. So there's like this interesting balance of like, you want it to work, but you also want it to feel seamless. We can dive into this a little bit, but keep going. I just wanted to frame like where this takes shape.
That's totally accurate. So yes, as a result of this very long and tough process that we put together, Incode resulted the winner in several dimensions, characteristics. I won't pitch Incode. I will let Iñigo to pitch Incode in that sense, but I can confirm that the main drivers of this decision was obviously that we saw the technological stack that Incode had, that was very smooth for the user experience, but also they were very connected to all databases across the region, specifically in Mexico, which is our main market. So we can validate the identity of our users against all those different databases and be sure that the user that we are onboarding is a real user, and we are not failing in that screening, right? So it has like both sides of the coin. First, ensuring a great user experience, but also a very deep connection to databases and controls that we need to have in place. Because if we onboard fraudulent users, it's not only a detriment or a risk for the company, but it's also for other users as well, because it's kind of a shared risk, at some point maybe. So that was like the ultimate reason that we selected Incode as to becoming one of our partners for identity validation and other checks that we do for onboarding.
What was before we get into what it is, just what was the thing that stuck out most to you? And you reviewed many different companies here. Like what was one of the key deciding factors of why they stood out in your mind?
I would say that like a strong LATAM footprint that Incode have was one of the main differentials
Like
against
depth,
the other.
regional depth.
Yeah,
Hmm.
exactly.
So speak a little bit about that. How have you built that? And what are these databases that he's very thankful that you guys have integrated so well?
Yeah, so the databases thing is interesting because we kind of pioneered that in Mexico, actually. So this varies by country. There's some countries like the US, for example, where it's like highly federated. Identity is managed in a very federated way, right? So if you go, if you go to Washington, there's not like a federal, database of, biometric data or whatever. You have to go to the DMVs, for example, and each DMV is run by the state. So that's an example. You go to Brazil, and then that's even more fragmented, right? Because you have so many different ID documents, and each state has their own rules. And then you have countries like Mexico or Colombia, for example, where you have a centralized governmental institution. In the case of Mexico, is the electoral institution that serves as that source of truth. We call them source of truth. So what that gives you in the process of identifying someone, it turns from a probabilistic identification where you use, our algorithms and all that, to a deterministic one, because you can for sure know if whoever is onboarding or whoever is doing an authentication process is who they say they is, against a governmental database that has a bunch of data, of data points, right? It could be biometrics, could be, of course, name, address, whatever, right? So we pioneered that. That's an important thing. We're pioneering that in the US as well, for example. We're first company to be able to connect to several of the state's DMVs, right? And a bunch of our clients in the US are quite happy at that. And then we've done it in Colombia, we've done it in Argentina. Now there are countries where that's not possible. There are processes where that is not needed from a regulatory standpoint. So still you need to be very strong on the performance of your algorithms when you're doing ID and ID verification. And I think that's also what stands out about Incode. I mean, we own all our stack, and that's very important because a bunch of our competitors kind of bunch third-party technology on top of their solution. What owning our own stack gives us is that, fraud is changing so fast. You need to adapt really fast, and not owning your own stack just makes you slower to react, right?
Yeah, let's dive into this a little bit. Like, what are you both? One, from maybe taking the infrastructure side of this, you're probably integrated with many different companies. You're seeing like across fintech or across different applications, the attempts at attempts at being fraudulent.
Yeah.
You see all of that.
Yeah.
I'm wondering for each of you, like, what are you seeing thematically that you maybe have seen in the past, or like examples of things that you were able to stop from happening? Like, give us a real, as tangible as possible. Like, what is actually being prevented here, and what have you seen happen? If these types of things aren't in place.
Yeah, I think the LATAM point that Nano was making comes into place here because, Incode, despite now being quite a global company, really started out in LATAM. And LATAM is as much as an adversarial place in the world to work in fraud, right? The type of fraud that we were seeing 4 or 5 years ago in Brazil, you would not believe. And then what we're seeing now.
What does that mean for those? What does that mean?
So it means like, the level of sophistication of deepfakes, for example, right? Or the ability for fraudsters to, get a jailbroken phone, put a virtual camera in, and then, slide deepfake videos in order to bypass an onboarding process.
So this is the part where they will essentially, it's identity fraud, where they'll appear that using a deepfake, that part of the KYC process where you're showing your face, like
exactly,
that would be faked.
Exactly, like bypassing a liveness
test.
A liveness test. The thing is, the MO is known. It's just the quality of how they're doing things with. We always talk about AI, and AI is lowering, of course, barriers and creating access and all that. But there's this other side that we see, is that AI is just giving all these tools to the fraudsters who are able to just increase the quality of their attacks.
Yeah.
And the only way to counter that is with just better technology, better machine learning algorithms, and I think that's where we stand out, because when we built the company 10 years ago, we always thought that there will come a time where the human eye would not be able to verify identity. So all our, a lot of the legacy identity companies had a human in the loop process, right, to verify identity. And since we started without that, and in LATAM, we have these two modes, right? It's just time and data, and we've been able to kind of climb on that to have the best trained models in the world, we think, to do a completely automated identity verification.
Yeah. No. What about you? What are you seeing when it comes to what you're ultimately trying to prevent here? What have you seen? What are some of the maybe learnings you've seen internally with this conversation around fraud and compliance, or what have you maybe seen in the industry externally that you're trying to avoid? Why is this so important for you to get right?
Yeah, I think that I fully agree with what Iñigo said here, that the level of sophistication that we are seeing in the industry to create fraud, it is incredible. We have seen very strong cases where deepfake AI, as Iñigo said, that's people that do the liveness check, that they have plugged in or adulterated the device, so they can just generate a deepfake AI version of their self or a different person. Several companies are failing to validate and detect that. So we are preparing a little bit for the future, because AI and this fraud will keep evolving with the time, and we want to be paired up with a provider that has a very strong technological stack to adapt themselves at the time, as fast as the fraud is adapting to new tools and ways to commit fraud. No, so that's the ultimate reason that we partner up, but it's also what we are seeing that is going to happen in the future. So having folks like Incode on top of our validations makes us being more prepared for that future, where with the time it's going to become very, very hard to detect fraudulent in platforms, like in digital platforms overall, right?
What are some, for those who aren't working in compliance or fraud full time, and they're not seeing this? I think crypto, digital assets, for in some ways good reason, has been associated with fraud and crimes, and bad actors typically are, this industry has, like any payments industry, we have had our fair share of that. What are you guys seeing as like really the main use cases that you're trying to avoid, or like landmines that this type of relationship or this technology avoids? For those who aren't working in the conversation, what are the most common ways that fraudsters are leveraging these types of tools? Like, I'd love specific use cases that you've seen, or like common ways that, deepfakes is a good example, but like, let's say that happens and these fraudsters are able to access these systems. Why do they, how are they, once they're in, what are they doing? Like, what are the core ways that they're taking advantage of this?
There is a long variety of use cases, to be honest. Bad actors are basically trying to launder money, or to enter money that is illegal, from illegal sources to platforms. Likely in Bitso, as I mentioned, we invested a ton since our very beginnings into having great fraud prevention barriers and controls on top of our onboarding processes. So we haven't seen many of that in our platform. But as I mentioned, we are seeing that in the industry, the fraud cases are constantly evolving. So we want to be prepared for that future, wherever the sophistication is super high. But ultimately, answering your question, use cases are like bad actors that use an identity of a person that they are not themselves, but they maybe through phishing, they got some personal information from a third party, and they onboarded that person using an identity that is not themselves, to move money or to move illegal funds across the financial services. And that's, I will say, that is like the most common use case of bad actors. And for sure, maybe Iñigo has more context. And
Yeah, I mean, I can give a couple of examples. I mean, on lending use cases, for example, I mean, you can onboard and then.
So if I have like a great credit history and someone who doesn't could intentionally try to steal my credit, my identity to
I mean, we saw fairly recently in one of the countries we operate where credit bureau information was filtered, for example, right? So a fraudster could steal your identity and go ask a credit on your behalf if you had a good credit, and then they'll open a new account and they'll receive the funds and run away. Another is, financial institutions have several authentication use cases, right? So you might have a biometric authentication use case for when you want to, change the device that you had uploaded with a bank or whatever, and those are great windows for account takeover use cases, right? So someone can impersonate you, take over your account, and literally just go inside and empty your account. So going back to one of your original points is how do you build this trust layer without adding friction to an already friction-full process, right?
Yeah, because you could take a weeks asking questions and diligencing these users.
You need to go to a
mail us this thing. I mean,
and then it kind of defeats the purpose of what Bitso are doing, which is just decentralizing and giving access and lowering barriers and all that. So that's what we feel like really at Incode. We feel really compromised in our partnerships because we are an agent of a lot of the missions that companies like Bitso are pursuing, right? I mean, we are a very special part of that, and we take that very seriously.
Yeah, it's an interesting tension because these tools reduce barriers, they give access by nature, but compliance and onboarding by nature is putting barriers in the way.
Correct.
So it is an interesting thing. As we close here, I know this was quick. What would you guys say, just from maybe your perspective as the adopter or the platform side, and then you as the infrastructure, like what would be the main, if you were speaking to others in your positions in other companies, or you're speaking to other nanos, what is your main piece of advice or like things that you've learned throughout this very extensive process of vetting Incode? Like, what would be your advice to maybe others at other payments companies who are considering this really crucial stack decision?
Yeah, I think that I am gonna repeat myself a little bit, but it's a matter of preparing for the future because no matter if the current company is not receiving these fraudulent actors, it can just happen in a second. The bad actors exploit a vulnerability in a platform, and if you are not prepared, if you haven't built the right technological stack, if you haven't partnered up with the right persons to make those controls or help you during the onboarding process, that company is gonna be under a severe risk. So my suggestion maybe for those in my roles in other companies is to be prepared, because we are seeing that AI is evolving at an exponential rate and everything is changing. And you really want to have a very robust partner helping you abstracting all that complexity out from the users, but also ensuring that you are going to be prepared for that moment.
Awesome.
Yeah, I mean, we see our partnerships as technology partnerships, right? So what we offer our customers is that we jump on our bandwagon of innovation, right? We're at the forefront of a lot of these things. And I think that depend on us, on our ability to speed up innovation. And we're seeing that. I mean, some of the topics we're talking about, they will just get more complex. The trust part will always be at risk. For example, as we enter the agentic world and economy, right? I mean, just imagine each of us is going to have, hundreds of agents working on our behalf, maybe moving funds from one place to another. There's going to be the need to put processes in place to identify who's behind those agents, right? Like the personhood part. It's not only just, if you are who you say you are, is if you're human, right, doing the process. And we are entering into all these things that are quite frontier, but they're closer than what we might imagine. And I imagine Bitso is depending on us and saying, well, they're probably working on their their agentic plan and all that is, well, how are we going to be able to partner up in that as well, right? And so that's an example on how it is at the end an innovation partnership, and I think that's what we offer, and we're super happy to be able to have the trust of Bitso, and looking forward to this.
It's incredible. Well, we in the coming weeks are announcing a new series, a new media series called Incline, which is going to be focused entirely on agentic commerce. So if you guys are building some cool stuff in that world together, maybe we can have you guys back for that. We do the show virtually. I know we're in person right now, but guys, this was fun. Thanks for unpacking this relationship a little bit, diving into just the key part of the stack around compliance. I know it can be like boring for some, but it's incredibly important to get right, as we've talked about. So really appreciate y'all's time.
I'm happy to be here.
Well, that was our live conversation with Bitso and Incode here in Mexico City. We're in the Stable Dash booth powered by Agora. We're going to take a quick break, and we have a lot of conversations up next. So folks, stick with us. We'll be right back. Thank you.